Welcome to another Unwinding with Fiber and Fabric and Tour de Fleece 2023. Today is the last day of the Tour de France and the first day of the Tour de France Femmes. So that means one more week of spinning vlogs before I return to my regular schedule and my regular podcast style. It also means that my topic basket is getting very small. And on the subject of topics, let's take a look. We have silk, sliver, caps, and hankies. That is our topic area. Okay, so you might notice I've already started spinning. I figured since silk was the topic, I dropped my card. We're just going to leave it down there. This is actually not my first attempt to record this vlog, thus the reason I have started. If you remember my red and white polka dots, which is now pink, we are having a take 2 of it, but this time instead of using silk noil, I am using silk sliver, and that is actually spelled the same as sliver but pronounced sliver. At least that's what I am told. If somebody out there knows that it's supposed to be sliver rather than sliver, please let me know and know what the source is, because it keeps coming back to sliver. And yeah, but we have different terminology for things, so why not? Hopefully this time I might be able to retain my white background, my red spots for a little bit longer than I did the last time. But I've been having a slight issue with my dyes not exhausting properly and bleeding. My 3 yarns that I have been doing, I applied them up yesterday. I knew why they were having some issue in the sense of these two. I could still feel lanolin on them. I didn't get them scoured enough. But the blue one was giving me fits. And so after having spun it up, I took it, put it in a bowl of vinegar and water. I shoved it in the microwave and I microwaved it 2 minutes at a time until it was well up to heat that it needed. Then I let it set. And now it doesn't seem to be bleeding. So I'm thinking maybe with all the different weather patterns that we've been having, that my well water is a little different right now. And yes, I use well water, and the minerals in it can affect sometimes the dyeing process. But I'm pretty pleased with those 3. I love the colors. I think that they will be beautiful with my natural colored yarn that I'm spinning. Same fleece, just undyed, and I think it'll be beautiful accents. I wanted to share those with you. I do not know their weight or their yardage yet. I will be putting that information on Ravelry soon, maybe even later today. So I haven't done them yet because they really are just finished drying. Set them out of the way, and let's get on to silk. So I started spinning already because yes, it's been one of those days. This is not the first time I have tried to record this. I have not had technical difficulties. I think it's more likely to say I've just had human life difficulties. And at the end of recording it before, I realized I'd left something out, and I finally decided, sometimes a do-over is a good thing. So all I'm doing, like I've done before in the last video on trying to get the red and white polka dot, is in this case I have a 2-ply rather than a chain ply. I can't say that 2-ply from a center pull ball is much easier than the chain ply was doing. It wants to get caught up. I have silk getting everywhere, and that leads me to the first thing I want to remind about dealing with silk. If you are going to work with silk, make sure your hands are smooth. Make sure that your area is smooth. A nice clean drop cloth in your lap can help. And unlike me at the moment, take off your rings, because anything that this silk can attach itself to, it will. So I'm trying to catch the silk in between the plies is the idea. I'm not not completely successful. It's wrapping around the plies more so than staying in between them. I think it's probably better if I tear off a piece. Yeah, that's working. So as you can see here, I have actually been trying to do this. This is another one of those cases of something that you probably shouldn't do in front of camera while you're trying to talk about it. This is why I'm not doing a tutorial video. This is not a tutorial video. This is an inspiration. If I show you how utterly crazy it is for me while I'm trying to talk in front of a camera, maybe you will say, you know what? I can have a little of that craziness in my life. I'll give it a try without the camera. It's inspiration. Excuse me. A lot of congestion this week. We had extraordinarily warm temperatures and high humidity combined. The combination was kind of rough. And then we had torrential rain came and a little bit less warm temperatures. And I've been sleeping actually a little better this last couple days. And heavy, deep sleep tends to make me a little congested in the morning. So I apologize if I continue to cough. So I can say that this technique is one that does seem to do the trick. I would recommend, I mean, it's fun. It's fun to allow yourself to do a little trial and error. But let's talk about silk. So what I have been trying to put in it is silk sliver. I have in the past for this one here was using silk noil. So what is silk sliver? What is silk noil? What are these words? So let's start with there. Silk sliver. Well, actually, let's start this with where does the silk come from? And I have these on hand for demonstration purposes. Pretty much that's it for demonstration purposes. But that is a silk cocoon. And this silk cocoon has no holes in it. And you can hear as I rattle. This is a silk cocoon that in its preparation, they terminated the life of the silkworm. They did not allow it to eat its way out naturally. In the fabric world, you can find silk that is harvested by allowing the silkworm to eat its way out, and it creates shorter, slubbier bits, and that is oftentimes in something like a silk dupioni, okay? Or silk dupion. I think I've heard it said both ways, okay? So first thing to know, silk comes from a cocoon. It is from a silkworm. And there's a lot of information about the raising of silkworms and I think it's called sericulture. So there's a lot of information out there. So if you're interested in getting into silk, but you're concerned about the harvesting of silk, I would recommend you do your research. So I'm just putting that out there as a caveat to begin with. So this is the silk cocoon. From the silk cocoon, we have the ability to, and there are videos, you can see it, and it's just amazing. You soak the silk cocoon, and then you can pull off the fiber. And it is legitimately these microscopic thin silk fibers that get reeled off onto a reel, much like my winding wheel, but a little bit different. Reeled off on a reel, and that long, continuous, unbroken thread is what we start our silk process with. Now, of course, there are differences, different ways of handling the silk. When it comes to unwinding it and keeping long, strands and then combing them, and I would imagine Even if you had silk that you allowed the worm, the worm to eat its way out, the caterpillar, I guess it's I think it's a caterpillar, yes. The silkworm, probably caterpillar type, but even in the case where you allow it to work its way out and there's holes, you probably can pull off the strands, okay, and comb them. If I take the silk sliver, which is a combed top preparation, those aren't long strands. These are short. So this is not a reeled off continual strand silk. So that's something to keep in mind. You can do your research. You might find, because this definitely is shorter strands, this silk may be silk that the life cycle of the silkworm is not interrupted. So combed top in silk form is called silk sliver. Okay. And as some, I've had people, I've seen conversations recently about combed top usually has a beginning and an end, different ends. The end that is, it's being pulled off of, in essence, there's an easier way to draft it and a less easy way to draft it. Make sure you have the end in which the drafting is easy, not getting caught all the time. When I was messing with this earlier, I was testing it. So this is the silk sliver. I've dyed it, and so that's why it's no longer looking as pretty. This side doesn't, it's grabbing on itself. This side is slipping. And it is something you can feel. This, sometimes it's not as noticeable. Sometimes it's more noticeable. So test your top, whether it's wool or silk. Test to see if there is an end that drafts more easily than the other. All right, back to silk cap. So, not silk cap, silk cocoon. See, that takes me on to the next subject. When we take a silk cocoon like this, we can soak it in water and we can then stretch it, much like you see somebody stretching out pizza dough. You can stretch it and set it over the top of a square frame or a domed configuration like the a hat model, what we use to make felted hats, so a hat form. You can stretch this out and set it over the top, and then when it dries, you have a silk cap or a silk hanky. In a silk hanky or cap, though, it's not just one cocoon. That's what I want to make sure to mention. It is not just one cocoon, it's many cocoons. So, I'm going to pull out. I have silk caps. I don't have any silk hankies. The principle is still the same. In this case, though, as I open it up, I can open it up because it was formed over a mold. Okay? Whereas with a silk hanky, it's going to be flat in the form of a square, like a handkerchief. But this is many, actually, this is a really good, you can see here holes that have been put, there's holes here, and that's probably where they're stretching it, and that's where it's tacked down on one side, and then they pull it and stretch it over the top. So this is many, many layers. This can be anywhere from 10 to 20 layers of cocoons stretched out. I have I have spun with this in a previous video. I am not going to do any more with this right now. I'm going to put it back in its bag because, as I said, I have not prepared my hands. I have my ring on. Those are all things that can get in the way because that silk grabs on everything. So when I go into spinning silk, whether it is a silk sliver or a silk hanky or a silk cap, the ring comes off. I use sugar and oil scrub, like olive oil and sugar to scrub away any catches on my skin. I make sure my hands are as smooth as possible. My hands are not smooth as possible. I've been carding a lot. I have some calluses from carding. My hands are dry in places from all of the spinning. Today is not the day to be working with silk. And so I'm putting the caps back in there because they're already attached. Just working with this silk, it's attached to everything. It's going everywhere. So we have silk sliver, we have silk caps, silk hankies. Two different ways of spinning silk, from a silk top or from silk that has been stretched out over a frame to create, in essence, a drafting form. And yes, it does draft, and it can make very, very nice silk. It's different from silk sliver though, because when you're dealing with a top, all of the manky bits have been combed out, and what you end up with is that other terminology that I was using. I was trying to find there it is, the dyed stuff. Silk noil. And silk noil is the silk neppy stuff. It's neps and debris. It's the stuff the short bits, it's the stuff that's been combed out of the silk. And especially if the silk is processed from a cocoon that has had the worm eat its way out, you're going to have neps, you're going to have bits, you're going to have short bits, you're going to have longer bits. And so when you comb that top, just like with wool, you're going to remove all those bits. And a bag of silk noil can last you a very, very long time. This is technically probably enough for me to add into a sweater worth of spinning. But it's wonderful to add in. It adds texture, it adds color. It can create a unique yarn. Maybe not as unique as what I have been doing here, but as with this, that's what I was using as a silk neps to ply in with that. All right. As you might notice, silk does tend to take color vibrantly, but it can be tricky because it doesn't, it can also want to bleed. The intensity of color is there, but I do know that it is in the raw form. It's rather hard to get all that dye out. And when I've purchased silk hankies, I've run into the same thing. When I've worked with dyeing silk scarves, same thing. So just be aware, when silk can handle a lot more than people think. The delicate nature of silk, yes, it is a delicate nature, but a lot of times the reason it says hand wash and cold has more to do with bleeding than the fact that the silk might be damaged, honestly. Remember, silk is a very, very durable fiber. I wanted to show with you quickly, this is silk that has been spun from the silk sliver. It makes for beautiful lace weight yarns. This is about 23 wraps per inch, so not technically true lace weight. It's much more of a light fingering weight. It has lovely drape. It was a project I was working on. The project's been put on hold. I keep my silk. I was mentioning in yesterday's video that I keep my wool in 5-gallon buckets with lids. My silk and my angora and my finer fibers that are smaller volume, I have them in these buckets. They have lids. They keep the bugs out. These are actually kitchen food grade containers. Because sometimes finding the container in the size you want, that's the only way you can find it. So I have a bunch of these for my more delicate fibers. Just wanted to share that little tip. But there is another type of silk that you can get. So when you're trying to use silk, silk can feel cost prohibitive. But when you're blending silk sliver into another project, so it's adding the shine, it's adding strength, you're not using as much as, when you purchase. I mean, purchase a bag. How much was this? This was an 8-ounce bag. May seem expensive to purchase, but you're probably not going to sit and spin all 8 ounces in one project unless you're trying to make a silk, fine silk lace item. And it's going to take you a while to spin through the 8 ounces. Just letting you know, it's fine stuff. It really goes a long way. But there is a way to add some silk, and if you don't want to deal with the noils, because they really are little bits and pieces and they can go everywhere, there is something out there, and I only have it in dyed version. There is something out there called sari silk waist, and it is longer fibers in some cases, okay, and it's colored. This looks like confetti. But in the factories in which they make the silk for sari clothing, the silk production factories where the silks have already been pre-dyed and they're being woven in, the waste collects on the floor. They gather it up, and somebody has thought, hey, let's sell it to people who are spinning. And yes, I have seen people actually try to card this into spinnable fiber. It works great adding it on a blending board, blending it into other fiber to add pops of color. So unlike the silk noil, this has a little bit more staple length. It's a little bit more willing to stay in your project than sometimes neps and noils, silk noils would do. So another option is you can look at getting some silk, sari silk waist, and that's exactly how it's labeled in this case, is sari silk waist. Okay, so I wanted to have that as another option. Silk is something that adds some strength. It can add color. It can add shine to a project. It can add in some cases it can add texture. So it can be a wonderful wonderful fiber to have on hand if you are looking at it and you're groaning over the price. Just keep in mind, unlike buying something that is, I mean, compared to even compared to the finest wool, silk is so fine. Silk is so lustrous. You can make it, you can spread it out. You don't have to use, let's say you want to add silk to your socks to give your socks some extra strength. You don't have to do a 50-50. No, just you can do a 10 or 15% added silk. A little bit of silk will go a long way. But you notice sometimes in the pretty bumps and bats of fiber that we find, you notice that the silk is not tremendously incorporated. You can see the bands of silk. And that is oftentimes intentional. It's not being added to add strength to your finished yarn. It's added to give the luster and shine aspect. It's making it helps you make a yarn that blinks at you, in essence, as that silk hits the light. It catches the light in a different way. So keep in mind that if you're dealing with silk a little bit can go a long way. Okay, I think I'm going to try to wrap this up earlier than my first attempt. I want to just really seriously thank the people that have subscribed, you that have made comments, whether it is on YouTube, whether it is on my Facebook or Instagram or on Ravelry. I want to thank you. You are making this spin along so much more fulfilling for me. When I get a comment, when I get a question, it sometimes is the thing that it becomes the best part of my day. Because, and I know that anyone who has taught students knows this. even if we are totally prepared for the task at hand, we can feel doubt. We can feel self-doubt. We can feel inadequate. We can feel like our efforts don't necessarily hit the spot. And so when we get a comment or a question, in essence, an interaction, it can really make us feel so much better about our efforts. I do not do necessarily tutorial videos. I have explained why. Spinning crazy stuff in front of the camera, you do start to wonder if how people are taking this. I just want to inspire. I want to inspire you to try getting out of your comfort zone. I want to inspire you to try. If you see me being crazy, maybe it will inspire you to put aside some of your inhibition. I think that's the word, inhibitions. The things that inhibit you. There we go. Put them aside and try for yourself something a little different. It is my recommendation that when you're trying something different, you try to do it in a comfortable area, probably not in front of an audience or a camera. Although it is interesting to record yourself so you can look back at it later. But I want to thank you. That's what this is about. Now I'm not going to end up having this much shorter because I've spent all this time waffling around trying to just say thank you. I really do appreciate if you that have watched, that subscribed, that have hit like, that have made comments, that have just watched in the background. I appreciate every single one of you. Thank you for making this such an enjoyable journey. And I wish you happy spinning and happy unwinding with fiber and fabric, and we'll see you tomorrow.